The Argonaut wasn't just any ship. She was the ghost of the Earth Federation, a tale whispered in dark corners of space. Vanished 53 years ago, swallowed by the vast unknown beyond the Veil Nebula. Her fate became a legend. Some said the crew had found a new home. Others believed they'd simply become part of the void. But that was a long time ago, and in the galaxy, people stopped believing in the impossible. So when the distress signal began to ping out of Sector 9 Gamma, no one took it seriously. A pirate trap, a glitch, a ghost in the machine. Command brushed it aside, but the message kept coming, like an itch they couldn't ignore. It wasn't until the signal sent out its final pulse, an energy that couldn't be faked, that they acted. A scout ship, the Lancer, was dispatched to investigate. It seemed like just another futile mission, but something was off. The galaxy had learned to expect the unexpected, but what they found was beyond comprehension. Commander Darrow stood at the edge of the Argonaut's docking bay, the air heavy with unease. The ship loomed in front of him, her hull untouched by the ravages of time. No scarring, no signs of age, nothing. If anything, she seemed alive. His fingers brushed against the cold metal, and the hairs on the back of his neck stood on end. The ship's presence was more than just tangible. It was unsettling, as though it was watching him, waiting for something. When he stepped into the derelict bridge, his boots clicking sharply on the metal floor, it was like stepping into a memory. A rust-red sigil of the Earth Federation stared back at him from the control panel. But something was wrong. The symbols flickered, pulsing in a way that didn't belong. It wasn't just the technology, it was the ship itself. The Argonaut had changed. The weapons array that once rested in silence was now a twisting mass of sleek, organic patterns shimmering like muscle fibers woven into the fabric of time. And when Darrow ran his hand over the controls, they responded. Alive, not like machinery, but as though the ship had been breathing all along. The deeper they went, the more unsettling it became. The crew, the ones who had once lived here, they were still aboard, frozen in time. The airlock hissed open, and Darrow braced for the worst, expecting bodies decomposed, long dead. But what he found was far worse. The crew was still there, trapped in stasis, their skin glowing faintly in the dim lights. Their eyes twitched, almost as if they were still dreaming, caught in some eternal loop. The silence was deafening, and yet there was something about their stillness that felt alive. He radioed command, but there was no answer. Every attempt to reach out was met with static, as though the ship itself was preventing communication. Something was wrong, something he couldn't explain, and it was starting to creep under his skin. His gut twisted with the sensation that this wasn't just an ancient ghost ship. This was something more. When they brought the ship into orbit over Luna Base, the tension rippled through the station like a storm on the horizon. Dr. Kyle Wren, a young but brilliant scientist, was one of the first to board the Argonaut after the initial scans came in. He was skeptical at first, dismissing it all as coincidence, some strange anomaly, nothing more. But when he stepped onto the ship, a chill ran down his spine. The air inside was too thick, too charged. He couldn't put his finger on it, but it was as though the ship was waiting for him. He started his examination with cautious words, his report a careful mix of scientific terms: unusual isotopes, unknown materials, quantum entanglement. But none of that mattered in the end. The moment he saw it, that's when everything changed. The ship wasn't just built, it had been altered, grown, adapted, and it was still evolving, absorbing, changing its very nature. "I believe this ship has been modified by a non-human intelligence," he said, his voice quieter than he had intended. That single statement was the spark that ignited the firestorm. Within hours, Luna Base had transformed. Federation intelligence, top-tier science teams, and even the High Chancellor's Shadow Division descended on the station. The Argonaut was now locked down, its crew frozen in cryostasis. The mystery had shifted from curiosity to a dangerous game of secrets, one that would change everything they knew about the galaxy. But for Kyle, it wasn't enough to just study from the outside. Something called to him from deep within the ship's core. He wasn't just a scientist, he was a man on the brink of understanding something far beyond human comprehension. And even though every part of him screamed to stay away, he couldn't resist. He found his way into the belly of the ship, where he discovered the truth. The core, alive, pulsing, humming with power, was not of this world. It wasn't even built. It had grown like some organic mass, its surface covered in symbols that seared into his mind. When he reached out, the core didn't speak. It didn't have to. It didn't need words. Instead, it showed him visions of a war, an enemy so ancient it made the stars themselves shudder. And at the center of it all, it showed humanity, not as a race of survivors, but as a potential threat, one so dangerous that it could shatter everything the universe had come to understand. As the images burned into his mind, Kyle staggered back, barely able to process what he had seen. His vision swam with impossible images, alien ships, collapsing stars, and a future where humanity fought back against an ancient enemy. And there, at the center of it all, stood the Argonaut, its transformation complete, now the key to a future that had yet to unfold. Kyle's breath caught in his throat as the core's final message echoed in his mind. Humanity must prepare. They know you now, and they are coming. Kyle stumbled backward from the core, his chest rising and falling in shallow, panicked breaths. The vision still lingered in his mind, fragments of an impossible future. The core wasn't just a power source or a relic of alien technology. It was a key to humanity's survival, a warning from a race far older, far more advanced, and far more terrifying than anything they had encountered. His thoughts were a whirlwind, spinning in every direction, unable to make sense of what he had seen. How could this be possible? How could humanity have been marked for destruction by something they had never even known existed? He shook his head, trying to clear his vision, but the images kept flickering at the edges of his consciousness. Alien ships, towering, jagged structures that seemed to slice through the very fabric of space. Worlds ripped apart by weapons of unimaginable power, and humans fighting back, not as victims, but as warriors, refusing to be erased, refusing to be molded into the perfect, predictable order that the Valari believed in. But how? How could humanity fight against such an overwhelming force? How could they possibly stand a chance against beings who had wiped entire civilizations from the galaxy? The room around him felt suddenly too small. The walls seemed to close in, their smooth metal surfaces warping, breathing. Kyle could feel the ship now, not as a cold, lifeless machine, but as something alive, as though it were in tune with his every thought, his every pulse. His hand instinctively reached out, and the door to the central chamber slid open before him, as though the ship were welcoming him, urging him deeper into its secrets. He stepped forward, his feet moving on their own accord, as though guided by an unseen force. His mind was still reeling, but it didn't matter. There was no turning back now. He had seen it, and now he was a part of it. The future, the war, the Argonaut, it was all tied together, and it was his responsibility to understand it, to piece together what the core had shown him. The deeper Kyle went into the ship, the more he began to feel its presence, as though the walls themselves were watching him. It wasn't just a ship, it was a living, breathing entity, a being whose purpose was to protect something far beyond what humanity could comprehend. The air was thick with the hum of energy, charged with a strange, almost electric sensation that buzzed beneath his skin. His hands shook as he traced the contours of the walls, feeling the organic patterns that now overtook the ship's original design. And then he found it. In the heart of the ship, nestled deep within its core, was a chamber unlike any other. It wasn't a room, at least not in the traditional sense. It was more like a space where time itself bent, folded, and twisted into impossible shapes. The walls shimmered with a faint, eerie glow, and the air seemed to pulse with a low, vibrating hum. At the center of it all stood the core, now grown to an enormous size, pulsating in rhythm with the ship's energy. It was as if the ship was alive, and the core was its beating heart. Kyle approached cautiously, each step heavy with the weight of what he had learned. The core reacted to his presence, its surface shifting, its glowing symbols swirling as if to acknowledge him. His heart hammered in his chest as he reached out, unable to resist the pull. The moment his fingers touched the surface, his mind was flooded again with images, more vivid this time, more real. He saw Earth, but not as it was now. It was a place of chaos, half consumed by machines and war, its surface scarred and broken. Cities floated above the ground, half built and half destroyed, as if caught between two realities. Oceans had become weapons, their waters twisted and warped into tools of destruction. The sky was dark, bruised with the remnants of battles fought long ago. And yet, amidst the destruction, there were humans. They fought back, not as soldiers with weapons, but as survivors, unwilling to bend to the will of their oppressors. They built and adapted, creating technology that shouldn't have existed, bending the laws of physics, tearing holes in space and time itself, with nothing more than willpower and the tools at their disposal. They were the last hope of a dying world, the last bastion of resistance in a galaxy that had long since given up on them. Kyle's head spun as the images shifted again. He saw the Valari, the ancient alien race that had tried to wipe humanity from existence. He saw their ships, cold, sleek, and ruthless, designed to consume, to erase, to control. The Valari had watched humanity for centuries, and they feared what humans could become. They had seen the potential for chaos, for destruction, for the unpredictable, and they believed that in order to preserve order in the galaxy, they had to eliminate humanity before it could evolve into something uncontrollable. But the Argonaut had survived. The core had absorbed technology from a future far beyond humanity's reach, and it had adapted, evolving into something that even the Valari couldn't predict. The ship was more than just a vessel now. It was a weapon, a harbinger of the war to come, and humanity's only hope rested with it. Kyle stepped back from the core, his breath shallow, his heart racing. He couldn't unsee what he had just witnessed. The future of humanity, the potential for survival, was now laid bare before him. But it wasn't a clean, easy victory. The future he had seen was one of struggle, one where humanity would have to fight tooth and nail against an enemy far older, far more powerful, and far more terrifying than anything they had ever known. The ship seemed to pulse with a strange energy, as if in response to his thoughts. It was clear now. The Argonaut wasn't just a survivor. It had evolved, learned, and was now guiding humanity toward its future. But what future? The core hadn't just shown Kyle the strength of humanity, it had shown him the consequences of their survival. The victory that the Argonaut promised came at a cost. Humanity wasn't just fighting for survival, it was fighting for its very soul. And as he stood there, lost in the chaos of the visions, a soft voice whispered in his mind, not words, but a thought, a feeling. "You are the bridge." The core was speaking to him. It had chosen him, and now there was no turning back. The war had already begun. He didn't know how or why, but the core had made it clear. Humanity was no longer just a species fighting to survive. It was something more, something dangerous, something that could reshape the very fabric of the universe itself. The Valari knew this, and they feared it. They were coming. But so was the Argonaut. And so was Kyle Wren. Kyle stood frozen for a moment, the weight of the Corps' message pressing down on him like a mountain. He could feel the ship, feel the pulse of its energy coursing through him, resonating with a frequency he couldn't comprehend, but somehow understood in the deepest part of his mind. The Corps had chosen him, and its purpose had been clear. The future, the war, humanity's survival, it was all tied to him now. The feeling was overwhelming. His mind was no longer just his own. The knowledge of the future, the deep alien truths, were now etched into every thought, every impulse. He could feel the ship's influence on his very being, as if the lines between who he was and what the Argonaut had become were blurring, folding into one another. It was as though the ship had rewritten his soul, remaking him in its image, guiding him to a future that he could barely begin to understand. But one thing was clear. He couldn't go back. There was no normal life to return to. The Argonaut had chosen him for a reason, and it was a reason far larger than any one man, any one ship, or any one battle. This was a war for humanity's very future, one that would shape the galaxy for millennia to come. And yet, the deeper Kyle delved into the truth, the more terrifying it became. Humanity wasn't just facing extinction, it was facing a transformation that could either save them or destroy them. He turned from the Corps, the vision still fresh in his mind. The battlefield, the future Earth consumed by war, the twisted form of humanity's resistance against the Valari, the alien species that had decided humanity was an anomaly to be erased. His thoughts were interrupted by the soft thrum of the ship's systems, a low hum that seemed to vibrate in his chest. It was as though the Argonaut was speaking to him, calling him to take the next step. Kyle's legs moved of their own accord, carrying him down the winding corridors of the ship, deeper into its heart. His surroundings seemed to warp and change with each step, the metallic walls bending into organic patterns, veins of light pulsing through the floors, the walls breathing as though alive. The ship was no longer just a vessel. It had become something else, something far beyond human comprehension. He had once thought of it as a simple machine, a lost ship that had returned with secrets beyond its time. Now it felt more like a living entity, a being whose purpose was tied directly to him. He knew what he had to do. The Corps had shown him enough, revealed enough of the future for him to understand. Humanity wasn't just fighting for survival. They were fighting for evolution itself. The Valari, in their ancient arrogance, had decided that humanity's potential was too dangerous to let thrive. They feared the chaos humans could bring, the unpredictability of their spirit, their creativity. It wasn't just that humans would fight back. They would change the very fabric of reality itself. The Argonaut, a ship that had once been part of the Earth Federation, had adapted and grown in ways that no human mind could have predicted. It had evolved not just physically, but mentally and emotionally, absorbing the knowledge of a future that had not yet arrived. Kyle's fingers brushed against the ship's walls again, feeling the strange, organic fibers that now lined every surface. They weren't just decorative, they were functional, living. He could feel the ship responding to his touch, reacting to his thoughts, as if the very fabric of the vessel was attuned to his being. He wasn't just aboard a ship anymore, he was inside something alive, and that something was growing, preparing for a war that was already underway. He had seen it in the visions. The Valari's arrival, cold, calculating, and relentless. Their ships, towering structures of biomechanical perfection, would descend on Earth's solar system, ready to wipe out humanity before it could pose a true threat. And they wouldn't just destroy human life. They would erase everything that humanity could become. The Valari knew that to stop humanity from rising, they had to crush it before it could evolve. But the Argonaut had a different plan. It wasn't a ship designed to fight. It was a ship that had learned, that had adapted. The Valari had tried to erase it, to tear it from time itself. But the Argonaut had survived. And now, with Kyle at the helm, humanity had a chance to fight back. The corridors of the Argonaut seemed to stretch on forever as Kyle wandered deeper into its bowels, each step taking him further away from the person he had been and closer to something new, something more. He felt his mind expanding, his senses sharpening in ways he couldn't explain. The ship's systems seemed to integrate with his own thoughts, as though his very essence was becoming part of the Argonaut itself. He could hear the hum of the core, louder now, vibrating in his bones. His heart synced with its pulse, a rhythmic beat that matched the energy of the ship. He was no longer just a man. He was a bridge, a vessel between humanity and the future. The power of the Argonaut flowed through him, and with it came the knowledge of how to survive, how to adapt. It was the key to humanity's future, and now it was his responsibility to unlock it. But even as he felt the weight of that responsibility settling on his shoulders, Kyle couldn't help but feel a growing unease. The Valari were coming. They were closer than anyone realized, and they wouldn't just stop at Earth. They would wipe out every trace of humanity's potential, erasing them from history like a mistake that should never have been made. The visions had shown him that. But the Argonaut had shown him something else too. A way forward. The ship had evolved, absorbed knowledge and technology from a future that hadn't happened yet. It had learned how to bend the rules of space and time, how to adapt and evolve in ways that no other race could. And now it was time for humanity to do the same. Kyle turned back toward the core chamber, his mind made up. The ship had prepared him for this. It had chosen him for a reason, and he would not fail. The war was coming. The Valari would arrive with their fleet, cold and perfect, and they would try to erase humanity. But they didn't understand one thing. Humanity was not a race that could be wiped away. Humanity was chaos. It was unpredictability, and chaos couldn't be controlled. Kyle's heart raced as he stepped into the chamber again, his eyes locking on the core. It pulsed in time with his heartbeat, its surface shifting, its symbols glowing brighter. He wasn't just witnessing the future now, he was shaping it. The core was no longer just an object of study, it was a tool, a weapon, a promise of what was to come. And with it, he could lead humanity to victory. But the question remained, would humanity survive long enough to seize that future? The Valari were coming, and they were not going to wait. Their extinction fleet would be here soon, and when it arrived, there would be no mercy. The war that had been set in motion long before Kyle's birth was about to reach its climax. And Kyle Ren would be the one to decide the fate of the galaxy. The core pulsed in front of him, its energy like a heartbeat, and Kyle felt that pulse within his own chest, a synchrony that was as terrifying as it was awe-inspiring. He understood now that he wasn't just part of this mission. He was the key. The Argonaut wasn't merely a ship. It was the vessel carrying humanity's last chance at survival, and Kyle had become something else, something new, something beyond the limits of human understanding. He stepped closer to the core, the words of the ship's message echoing in his mind. Humanity must prepare. They know you now, and they are coming. The vision of the Valari, their cold, emotionless perfection, their unrelenting desire to erase anything they deemed a threat, was still burned into his thoughts. But it wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about evolution. Humanity had reached a precipice, and what happened next would determine whether they fell or soared. Kyle's mind shifted, a subtle yet profound change. He could feel the ship's systems now, not just through his senses, but in his thoughts. The Argonaut was a part of him. The core was no longer just a source of power. It was a consciousness, one that communicated not with words, but with raw emotion, instinct, and a flood of possibilities. He could feel it guiding him, teaching him, unlocking pathways in his mind that had never been there before. The ship had shown him the future, its destruction, its war, but it had also shown him the potential to change it, to become something greater than humanity ever thought possible. But as powerful as this new understanding was, there was a weight to it, a responsibility that threatened to crush him with its enormity. The Valari would not stop at simply erasing humanity from the galaxy. They feared humanity's potential to reshape the universe, to bend time, space, and reality itself. They were not just trying to survive, they were trying to control. And humanity, as chaotic and unpredictable as it was, could not be controlled. It would bend, it would break, it would create something entirely new. That was the threat. But for now, the real battle was time. The Valari were closing in, and they would not hesitate. The Federation, still reeling from the unexpected return of the Argonaut, was unprepared for the oncoming storm. The commanders, the leaders, the men and women in charge, they were too entrenched in their own sense of order, their rigid need for control. They didn't understand what Kyle had come to realize in the deepest recesses of his mind. The Valari weren't just coming to conquer, they were coming to prevent humanity from evolving, from becoming something that could change the balance of the galaxy. They were afraid, and in their fear, they would stop at nothing to extinguish the spark that humanity carried. As Kyle continued to stand before the core, his eyes unfocused, his mind drifting between the present and the future, the walls around him began to shift. The Argonaut was responding to him, reacting to the growing urgency. The ship's systems hummed louder, vibrating through the air, resonating in the very atoms of the space around him. It was as though the ship were coming to life, not as a machine, but as something far more primal, far more dangerous. And in that moment, Kyle realized that the Argonaut's true purpose wasn't just to protect humanity. It was to prepare them for the war to come, to transform them into something capable of standing against the Valari. The thought sent a shiver through him, but it also ignited something else, a deep, unwavering certainty. Humanity had the potential to break the rules of the universe, to change the very fabric of reality, and the Argonaut was the key to unlocking that potential. The door behind him hissed open, snapping Kyle out of his trance. He turned, his heart still racing, his thoughts racing faster. Commander Darrow stood in the doorway, his eyes narrow, his jaw clenched. The moment he entered the chamber, the air seemed to grow thicker, charged with an energy that Kyle could feel even before Darrow spoke. "You're still here," Darrow said, his voice sharp, tinged with suspicion and something else, fear. "You don't understand what you're dealing with." Kyle turned to face him, his expression calm but resolute. He wasn't the same man who had first boarded the Argonaut. He could feel it in his bones. He was becoming something else, something greater. "I understand more than you think," Kyle replied quietly, his voice steady but carrying a weight that Darrow couldn't ignore. "This ship, it's not just technology, it's a bridge between humanity and its future. We've been given a chance, Darrow, a chance to evolve, to become something the Valari never expected." Darrow's eyes flickered with doubt, but there was something else there too, something more dangerous. "You're talking about playing God. You think this ship is going to save us. You think you can control it. You're a fool." The word stung, but Kyle didn't flinch. He had seen enough of the future to know that humanity was on the edge of something monumental, something terrifying. Darrow didn't understand, and perhaps he never would. The Federation didn't understand. They couldn't because they still saw things in black and white. But Kyle had seen the chaos, the potential for change, and the way that the Argonaut was shaping humanity's destiny. "I'm not trying to control anything," Kyle said, his voice steady but carrying an edge. "I'm trying to survive. We all are. The Valari are coming, Darrow, and when they do, they won't just destroy us. They'll erase everything we could become, everything we will become, and we don't have much time to prepare." Darrow stepped forward, his gaze hard. "And what do you expect me to do? Hand over the Argonaut? Let you take control of everything?" Kyle shook his head. "It's not about control, it's about evolution. We can't just stay the same, Darrow. The Valari won't stop until they've wiped us out. But the Argonaut, it's shown me what we can become, what we can do. We have the chance to change the rules, and we have to take it." The tension in the air grew thick as the two men stood there, facing each other. Kyle could feel the ship around him, its systems humming with a strange energy, its walls vibrating with an understanding that was beyond his comprehension. It wasn't just about technology. The Argonaut was alive, and it had a plan, one that Kyle was starting to understand more deeply with each passing moment. But Darrow wasn't ready to accept it. His eyes narrowed, his hand moving to the sidearm strapped to his waist. "You're not in charge here. I am. And you'll do what I say, or I'll lock you in isolation until we figure out what the hell is going on with you." Kyle didn't flinch. He could feel the Argonaut's pulse quickening, the core responding to his presence, to his need. It was as though the ship understood. He had become a part of it now, and it would protect him, guide him. Darrow wasn't the one in control anymore. The Argonaut was. With a steady breath, Kyle spoke again. "You're out of time, Darrow. We all are. The Valari are coming. You can choose to stand in the way, or you can help us prepare. Either way, we won't survive unless we change." The ship hummed again, the walls around them seemingly breathing as the energy within them reached a crescendo. The decision, Kyle realized, had already been made. The Argonaut had chosen humanity. It had chosen him. And with that choice came the inevitable truth. The Valari wouldn't just be fighting humanity, they'd be fighting chaos. And chaos, as Kyle now understood, was the one thing they couldn't control. The tension in the room between Kyle and Commander Darrow was thick, the air crackling with an energy that neither man fully understood. The Argonaut was alive, its pulse syncing with Kyle's own heartbeat, its awareness expanding within his mind. He could feel it, a presence, a force that was no longer just a ship, but a living, thinking entity. And with that entity, Kyle felt an immense responsibility pressing against him. The weight of the universe itself seemed to be riding on his shoulders, but Kyle had never felt more certain of one thing. Humanity had no choice but to evolve, or face total annihilation. Darrow's eyes narrowed as he stepped closer, his hand resting more firmly on his sidearm, the tension in his stance betraying his readiness to act. He wasn't a fool. He could sense that something had changed in Kyle. This wasn't the scientist he had known. Kyle had become something else, something beyond human understanding, and that made him dangerous. "You're not making any sense," Darrow said, his voice low but filled with an edge of anger. "The Argonaut is dangerous. It's a relic of a failed mission, a piece of history we should have left buried, and now you—" "You don't understand," Kyle interrupted, his voice calm but firm. "The Argonaut isn't a relic. It's more than that. It's a tool, a weapon, and it's the only chance we have left." Darrow's lips curled into a bitter smile. "A weapon? Do you hear yourself? This ship isn't a weapon. It's a threat." Kyle took a deep breath, his mind racing as he tried to find the right words. How could he explain something so complex to someone who was still trapped in the old ways of thinking? Darrow saw the Argonaut as a piece of military hardware, a forgotten ship with outdated technology. He couldn't see the ship for what it truly was, a living, evolving entity capable of shaping the future. Kyle couldn't blame him. No one could understand unless they had felt the ship's pulse in their bones, unless they had seen the future that Kyle had glimpsed. Darrow, Kyle said, his voice softer now, tinged with urgency. This ship, this thing, it's not just from Earth, it's beyond us. It's a vessel of knowledge, of power, and it's evolving in ways we can't fully comprehend. The Valari, they've seen what humanity can become, and they're terrified. They've been watching us for centuries. They tried to erase the Argonaut from time itself, but they failed. The ship survived, and now it's here. And we have to use it, Darrow. We don't have time to waste. Darrow stepped back, his face tight with disbelief. And you think you can control it? You think you can just, become some kind of human weapon? Kyle's jaw tightened. I don't think we have a choice. The Argonaut is here, and it's choosing humanity. It's guiding us. It's showing us the path, and it's giving us the tools to fight back, to evolve, to survive. But we can't do it by sticking to the old ways. The Valari will destroy us if we don't change. Darrow was silent for a moment, his eyes flickering as if he were weighing the words carefully. Then he spoke again, his tone more cautious, though still filled with skepticism. And what about the Federation? What about Command? You think they'll just let you take control of this ship? Let you play God with the future of humanity? Kyle turned his gaze to the walls around them, the organic patterns shimmering softly under his touch, as if the ship were responding to his thoughts. The Argonaut was no longer just a piece of military equipment. It was alive, and it was part of him now. He could feel it pulsing with potential, a potential that could save humanity or doom it. We don't have time for the Federation to catch up, Kyle said, his voice firm. The Valari are coming. We can't wait for them to make a move first. The Federation doesn't understand what's at stake. They're too caught up in their old methods, their old ways of control. We can't let them stand in our way. We need to be ready, and we need to be ready now. Darrow's eyes hardened. And you think you're the one to lead us? You're just a scientist, Ren. You don't know what you're talking about. Kyle met Darrow's gaze head on. I'm not just a scientist anymore. I've seen what's coming. I've seen the future, and I know what we need to do. The Argonaut has given me the knowledge to fight back. But it's not just me. It's all of us. We have to take the next step, Darrow. If we don't, humanity will be wiped out. No more Federation, no more Earth, just dust. The silence between them was heavy, and Darrow's posture softened just slightly, though his eyes remained wary. He had known Kyle for years. He had seen him struggle, seen him wrestle with his ambition, his dreams. But he had never seen him like this. There was something in his eyes now, a conviction, a certainty that Darrow couldn't ignore. Maybe, just maybe, Kyle was right. Maybe the Argonaut wasn't just a ship. Maybe it was humanity's last hope. But Darrow didn't trust it. He didn't trust Kyle's newfound role as some kind of messianic figure. He didn't trust the alien technology, the strange living ship that seemed to be changing everything around them. It was too much, too fast. But he knew one thing for sure. The Federation wouldn't be able to stop the Valari. And maybe, just maybe, the Argonaut could. I'll give you one chance, Ren, Darrow said, his voice low. One chance to prove that this is the right move. But I'm not going to follow you blindly. If you're wrong, if you're leading us into destruction, I will stop you. Kyle nodded slowly. I wouldn't expect anything less. With that, Darrow turned and strode toward the door, pausing only to look back at Kyle, his face unreadable. We'll see if you're right. We'll see if this ship really is the key to saving us. As the door slid shut behind him, Kyle stood there for a moment, the weight of his words hanging heavy in the air. He had no illusions. Darrow was a man of duty, of order. He followed commands. But Kyle wasn't asking for obedience. He was asking for something more. Trust. Trust that humanity had a chance to survive, a chance to evolve, and a chance to fight back against the impending threat. The Valari were coming, and they would stop at nothing to erase humanity from the galaxy. But the Argonaut had chosen them, had chosen Kyle. And with that choice came the responsibility to change everything. As the minutes ticked by, Kyle could feel the tension building. The Argonaut was ready, its systems humming, its pulse resonating with the power of something ancient, something far beyond humanity's understanding. The Valari would arrive soon, but Kyle wasn't afraid. He had seen the future, and he knew that humanity's greatest strength was its ability to adapt. The core had shown him that. The future was not written in stone. It could be shaped, twisted, and rewritten, and humanity would be the ones to do it.